Hello, everyone. We are at the turning point of the patriarchy. It is peaking, and behind it, we can feel the seeds of the return to matriarchy coming. And I think this will be the year. I think this will be the year when we finally build something really substantial. And there's going to be a lot of work, and there'll be a lot of, trips and falls, and a lot of paths that we have to take, and a lot of ways we'll have to work our ways through it. But I think that this year is when we're going to see the tide turn. I think we already are. There's something about this year, I can feel it. I can feel something about this year that is going to really move us forward. And I think it's kind of interesting that it falls on the day after the full moon, the full wolf moon. And we are so closely linked to the wolves. They are, I think they are kin with us. I feel a very deep kinship to the wolves. And I think we all do, in a very deep core sense of the way they live as a community, the way they hunt and protect, but also embrace and raise and nourish their tribe, their clan, and the way they howl at the moon and the power they have to change the course of nature itself and to balance the ecosystem and be as powerful and as inspiring as we want ourselves to be, and yet also as terrifying and as predatory as we fear from the world. And yet they manage to hold the power of both. I mean, they are the embodiment of dark and light. And so as we feel the full wolf moon, and as we pass the Gregorian year, New Year of 2026, and as we are in the middle of winter and we look forward to spring around the corner, and for myself personally, as today is my 50th birthday, and so it's a new decade for me after a decade of just lots of facing the darkness and working with the inner demons. I think the tide is turning. I think the witches are coming back. I think the feminine power is coming back. I think in both the light and the dark, in both the very compassionate, nurturing, receiving ways, and in the fierce, protective, restoring justice, predatory ways. And the difference of predatory between Mother Nature and matriarchy versus patriarchy is its intention. When there are predators in Mother Nature or us, when we become predatory in recalling and returning justice, it is a sense of survival. It's in a sense of keeping the ecosystem in harmony and in balance and maintaining our own survival. Whereas in the patriarchy, the predatory runs amok and it becomes a parasite, it becomes a cancer, and it's to hoard and to control and to power over and to conquer what they fear, not just to survive, but to never have to face it again. Whereas in matriarchy with Mother Nature, we know that fear and death and challenge and is just a part of life. So when we fight, when we are fierce, when we prey onto others, or when we hunt, it is for the sense of our own survival and to maintain balance. And when justice is done, we are then the animal who shakes it off and returns back to the lake and drinks our water and eats our food and joins our clan. Whereas in patriarchy, it's like it never ends. The cancer mutates, the parasite grows, and it just continues to hunt over and over and over again because they've got this void inside of it. There is no core substance. There's no core meaning that holds them as whole. And so it's vampiric. They have to keep eating, feeding the blood of others in order to survive. It's unholy. It is literally vampires. I think vampires are the epitome of patriarchy in mythological lore. But I digress. Returning to matriarchy, feeling the shift. And as we are seeing, there is still a lot of pus leaking out of the patriarchy. We can see it all over the world. And while some things have turned for the better, for example, in 2025, I said that this was the year of the peak for the gender ideology, trans ideology, and that it was going to fall now. And it is. It's starting to fall. And in 2026, I think it's going to start to wither off. And people are returning to a sense of, biology is sacred, and our innate sense, our innate state of womanhood and manhood is sacred, and teaching others to believe that they were born wrong there's something really inherently immoral about that. And these poor people need help, not enabling. So that's falling by its wayside. But you're going to see more pus coming out. You're going to see, more wars and more. I mean, just yesterday, Trump went into Venezuela and brought Maduro back, the dictator of Venezuela. And now there's Venezuela's up in arms. And, we're going to see continuing wars through Israel and Gaza and the Middle East. And we're going to see pus coming out of our own country with our own governments, and, economic collapse and drug addictions and everything. The pus has to come out in order for us to clean it, and we are seeing that. But along with all that, there is a real grounding, substantial stirring from women everywhere, and even a few men who are just sick and tired of all of this and want to rebuild a better world, return to a better society. And many people have many different views about what that's like. But I think at the core of it all, it's to become back in honor, in tune with our own sense of nature and our own cycles and seasons. And who is a better teacher than that, than Mother Nature? And women who are the keepers of Mother Nature, as they always are. The females of every species are the keepers of Mother Nature, as we are literally the birthers of life, from her womb to ours. So we're seeing a great stirring. So I urge you, while you see the pus coming out, to also see the other side. And I'm reminded of the story that I'd like to read to you today from this book, If Women Rose Rooted by Sharon Blackie, that sat with me in my 40s as I went through darkness. So many times I lost count in order to heal my trauma from abuse. And in order to every time I talk about my abuse and trauma, it kind of still triggers me a bit. So the time that I spent in my 40s healing my deepest trauma, and I spent a good decade there, I think I'm finally starting to see the light at age 50. I digress. I went through this story, I went through this book, and there was this reading here that really just sat with me. And it felt like what I was going through, trying to retrieve my own inner power as a human and as a woman. And what I think that we, women, as we start to return to matriarchy, need to go through in order to be able to handle the pus and to heal, to start to heal the world and heal ourselves. So I'm going to read this to you, and I hope you enjoy it, and let me know what you think. Okay, so the first part is not Sharon Blackie's words. It's an old folklore tale that she tells in the book, and it's called The Buried Moon. A long time ago, the bogs were full of dark things, shadowy creatures and crawling horrors, scuttling, biting things, and wet, slimy, sucking things. Nobody knew much more about them than that. It wasn't so bad when the moon was shining. Then the dark things would sneak away back into the crevices and hollows, and the people of the land could walk down to the borings unafraid, almost as safe as they were during the day. But when the moon was dark and hidden in the night sky, well then, it was a different story entirely. And the things that dwelt in the darkness would come out and terrorize anyone who might happen to be passing by. Sometimes those people would not be seen again. Sometimes they returned mad to the village. It happened one day that the moon heard about this, about the darkness that filled the bogs during her absence, and the dark things associated with it. Being the good mother moon that she is, she was sorry for the people of the land and wept over their pain. And then she dried her tears and decided that she'd better see what she could do about it. And so the moon came down from the sky to the bogs to find out for herself what happened during the dark times. For only the bogs that she knew were those that were lit by her own beautiful light, with the reflection of her face in the pools and the small lakes, and the pale beauty of wet rocks and the shining chandeliers of tears that dripped from the gorse bushes in the early morning dew. At the end of the month, down from the sky, the great moon stepped, and first wrapping herself in an enormous black cloak, with a big black hood over her shining white hair so that no one should know who she was. She trod the bog road, and everything was dark, 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 but for the faint glimmer of stars in the pools, and the light that came from her tiny white feet peeping out of her enormous black cloak. The moon drew her cloak tighter around her and trembled a bit to see such dark, but on she went until the track ran out, and she stepped as light as from the wind. But on she went until the track ran out, and she stepped as light as the wind from tussock to tussock between the greedy, gurgling water holes in the deep, dark heart of the bog. But then, as she came near to an especially large, dark pool, her foot slipped on a flat, wet rock, and she began to tumble in. She grabbed at a gorse bush to steady herself, but the spiky leaves surprised and pained her, and she let go, and in she fell deep in the still dark pool. She looked up, trembling in the cold, and all around her she saw the shadows and shifting things creeping towards her. She grabbed at the long bramble stalk, trying to pull herself out, but as soon as she touched it, it twined itself around her wrist and held her fast. The more she pulled, the tighter it held, and its thorns bit into her pure white skin. As she stilled herself for a moment, wondering what she might do now, she heard a voice in the distance, calling out in a crusty old voice, and then she heard steps floundering along, squishing in the mud and slipping on the tufts. And finally, through the darkness, she made out a big white face with bright, frightened eyes. It was a man, and he had strayed off the path and became lost. Spotting the light that flickered out from her cloak as the moon tried to free herself, he struggled on towards the pool, thinking that the light might mean help and safety. And when the moon saw that he was coming closer and closer to the deep hole, she fought and fought to free herself, fearing that he too would fall and become trapped in the pool and maybe even drown. So hard she fought that the black hood fell off her shining white hair, and the beautiful light that spilled out drove away the darkness and terrors of the night. Oh, the man cried with joy to see the light again, and to see the dark shadowy things fleeing back into the dark crevices of the bog. For they couldn't abide the light, and now finally he could see where he was, and where he needed to be, and so off he ran, back across the boreen again, finding his way home. He was in such a hurry to get away he hardly thought to wonder at the source of the light, or to look down at the brave Mother Moon, who was glad to see him safely back on his path, that she forgot to call out to him for help. And so again she struggled, thinking how fine it would be out of the bog again, pulling and fighting as if she were mad, but still the bramble held tight, and all she succeeded in doing was spilling the black hood over her face again, so that the light went out and the darkness came back to the bog. And out again crawled the dark things. With screeches and howls, they crowded around the pool, mocking the moon and snatching and beating at her, shrieking with rage and spite, swearing and snarling. They knew her for their old enemy, the one who drove them away into the dark corners and kept them from working their wills. And so miserable was the moon that she crouched down further into the dark, cold, and shivering, and lost. The dark things fought and squabbled about what they should do with her, till a pale light white began to rise in the east, and the dawn began thinking about breaking. The dark things saw that they were running out of time, and so all at once they caught hold of the moon and shoved her even deeper into the pool. And all at once they caught hold of the moon and shoved her deeper into the pool. And two giant bogles went and found a huge, heavy rock and rolled it on top of the pool to keep her from rising again. And there lay the moon, buried in the bog with no hope of help. The days passed, and it was time for the new moon's coming, but the moon did not come. And the nights remained dark, and all the evil things ruled over the bog, wilder and madder than ever before. And so the people of the land went to the wise woman who lived in a small stone cottage in an old oak wood, and asked her if she could help them find where the moon had gone. The old woman looked at her book, and she looked at her brew pot, and finally she looked at her fire, and nothing could be seen of the moon, and so the people went away wailing. The nights passed in darkness, and passed until one evening, his memory jogged by a fleeting conversation he heard in the street. The man who had strayed into the bog began to wonder himself whether the light he had seen in the pool might not have been the moon. But because he had been lost that night, he knew that he would not be able to find her again. So off he went with the other people, back to the wise woman in the old oak wood. She listened to what he had to say. She looked in her book, and looked in her brew pot, and finally looked into her fire, and there she nodded her head. "I see it now," she said to them. I see where you will find the lost Mother Moon." And she told them how the men must go to the bogs just before the night gathered, each one with a stone in his mouth and a hazel wand in his hand. And she told them the way they must follow, and how they might recognize the place where the moon was to be found. The next night off they went together, the men of the village, led by a woman who carried a burning stick to light their way and turn back the dark things from the path. They traveled on through the growing dark, stumbling and fearful of the sighings and mutterings all around them, and the cold wet fingers which reached for them. But soon it was as the old woman had said, and they recognized the signs and came to the pool where the moon lay buried. They stopped, amazed, for there was a huge stone, half in and half out of the water. But the lid did not fit tightly, and through the crack they saw the sliver of light shining out from underneath like a dying candle. Taking the strength of all the men together, they lifted up the stone, and forever afterwards they were sure that just for a moment they saw a strange and beautiful face shining up at them out of the blackness of the water. But all at once they were blinded by the light, which came so quickly and so dazzling, and they covered their eyes. And the next thing they knew, there was a full moon back in the sky shining down at them, bright and beautiful and kind as ever, making the bog and its paths as clear as day and stealing into the dark corners. So when I was going through my healing, I often felt like I was the moon trapped in the bog, and all the tiny dark things, all the demons from my past kept crawling on me and wanting to take me down. And I had to be the wise woman outside of the bog to look into my library, look into Mother Nature, look into my resources, look into my cauldron, to find out what happened to the exiled moon and to find ways to bring her back. And I had to use my wise feminine power and my wise masculine strength, the ferocity of women, because we have it too, and the protectiveness, to go through the brambles, to go through the bog, lift the heavy rock, and find the moon. And the moon is our exiles. The moon is the parts of us buried by the tiny, crawly, shadowy, dark things from the patriarchy, from those that harmed us, from all the things evil in the world that want to take us down. And so we hide ourselves until we can find safety. And I think this is also a message of the patriarchy itself, all those tiny, evil, dark things that want to grab at the moon and conquer it and hide it so that they can do their evil things. And I think women everywhere now are being the wise old woman, finding our group, finding our movements to trek into the wood with fire to light our way and retrieve ourselves and to retrieve our innate power and divinity as a matriarchy and as Mother Nature, as our creatures, to fight the tiny shadowy things and have them go hide in the dark again so we can rebuild. And so this story rings to me true as a survivor of trauma and as a woman who wants to return a matriarchy. And I wonder to you, if you've heard this story before, and what you think, and if you haven't, what you think. What meanings did you find that came from it, and how does it ring true to you in your own personal journey of healing, and also as we as a society are moving towards a matriarchy, what it is that we mean to do. And I think it's important to note that it's not the moor and the bog that is itself a danger. It's all the little entities, all the little, unjust things hiding in the corner, waiting their turn to burden us. That's the problem. Because within in the moor and the bog is great, great life. But there's always these little things that like to try and destroy it. And this is kind of a discussion, I guess, for another time, or those who work with this side of life. What do you think these little entities are? Is it just the ruminants of thousands of years of patriarchy, running amok? Is it some spiritual or demonic entity, in our universe that hides? Is it another part of ourselves? Is it, our wounds? What is it that you think that grabs us? And what is it that you think we need to do to make sure that they don't take us down and hide us? And if they manage to, where we will find the wise old woman in us and in the world to bring back the moon. So again, the story comes from If Woman Rose Rooted. In the rest of the chapter, she talks about the moor and the bog, and I highly recommend reading that chapter if you are somebody who feels like you're trapped in the moor and the bog, because she talks a lot about how it is a great lesson and how you can find resources and wisdom while you're trapped there, and what the meaning of the moor in the bog is, and how it can help you heal. And then I think there's it in the greater sense when you read the chapter about what it means as we try to return a matriarchy in a world hell bent on keeping the patriarchy. And so, what does the moor and the bog and the moon, the brambles and the tiny dark things, what does it all mean for us as we women and humans go through this journey? So, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please do comment. I will link the various, well, this video will be posted on YouTube and on my Patreon page, where I have the First Church of Matriarchy. And this is like a matriarchal sermon that I'm doing. So it'll be pasted on both places. And I urge you to become a member of both. And I will see you on the flip side. The full moon is still up tonight. So go out there and howl, ladies. And let's make this, let's use it to our advantage, the great moonlight, and do our work. I'll talk to you soon.